This is a ManeHustle Media Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Jackie O and you're listening to Militantly Mixed.
Yo, this is Rashani from the Single Simulcast. And when I'm not making you laugh or making up parody songs, I'm kicking back, listening to Militantly Mixed.
ManeHustle Media Podcasts are recorded on the ancestral lands of the Chumash, Tongva, Hohokam, and Yucateco Maya people, and we wish to pay our respects to the people of those nations, both past and present. Konnichiwa, what's up, cousins? Welcome to Militantly Mixed, the podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. I am your Sir Auntie, Charmaine Fury, aka The Blasian Blurred, and this is episode 207. My guest today is Rhia Maîr Kaur, aka The Mixed Race Mama. She has been doing Instagram content, mixed race Instagram content for quite a while now. We've been following each other. We don't know each other, but we've been following each other, supporting each other's content. And recently she released a new podcast called Mixed Race Mama, the podcast. This is a cool podcast because it's 5-minute episodes that are kind of covering a topic within mixedness. And she comes at those topics with her best mixed race bestie energy. So it's like having a little chat, a little check-in on something that we kind of deal with as mixed people every day. What's in a name? Where are you from? No, where are you really from? These things that sort of happen to us as mixed race people all the time. She takes down to a chewable 5-minute chat on the podcast, and I really like the way she puts her content out. In addition to that, of course, like I said, she's been doing Instagram content for a while where she does a little bit more longer form diving into different things, and she really just does have mixed race bestie energy. So if you're not already following Mixed Race Mama on Instagram, please go do so. But then also head on over to your favorite podcatcher like Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening to Militantly Mixed from, and get the Mixed Race Mama podcast as well. Something that you can consume on a break from work, or while you're driving down the road, or while you're taking a walk down to your mailbox, whatever. The 5-minute episodes, really consumable. And you'll just love her vibe. Her energy is great. You're going to enjoy it. Before we get into today's episode, I have to send out a big thank you to Rhia, because it was just a comedy of errors for me that day. I recently leased a new home here in Mexico, and not all of my services are set up. So the night before, I was staying at the house by myself, and it was mostly empty. It has a little bit of furniture, but not a lot. And I was staying there to take care of some internet stuff. The next morning, I was going to record my episode because it's going to be nice and private and quiet with Rhia, and I was going to go back to my Airbnb. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, started recording, and then my landlord started calling so frequently that she popped through my Do Not Disturb to tell me that the pool cleaner was trying to get into the house, but their access has changed because occupation changed. So I had to stop recording with Rhia about 3 times to talk to my landlord, to let the pool cleaner in, to let the pool cleaner out. And this is, first of all, not something I've ever dealt with before. I've never had a pool in my home, and never had a service entrance type of establishment that, people can actually enter my backyard if I'm not home, if they have access, things like that. I just never dealt with anything like this, and I just kept having to stop, and for like big chunks, 10-15 minutes at a time. So what was supposed to be an hour-long recording ended up being like nearly 2 hours. I felt so bad, but Rhia was dope the whole time. Energy stayed up the whole time, was like, no, I get it. This, you weren't expecting it. We'll just get it back in it. And then she would immediately jump right back into the topic. No problem, no gap. And I've done this edit. You can't find the moment where I've had to pin this thing together. It's perfect. So I am so grateful. First of all, that she was able to keep up her energy the whole time. It was so inconvenient to happen when you expect to be recording with someone for an hour and it ends up pushing to 2. I really just appreciate how dope she was about it. So Rhia, thank you for giving me that time and being so patient and just popping back in on topic every time. I was afraid it was going to be a difficult edit. It was like one of the smoothest edits I've had in a long time. So I really appreciative of that. The other thing with this episode is just that because I'm in my new place, I don't have a lot of furnishing yet. I have hard surface floors and concrete walls, and it sounds like I'm in a very cavernous space. So there's some updates that need to happen before things start sounding really good. Like I need to get rugs so that my hard floors can absorb some of that sound, things like that. And for whatever reason, another failing was that my mic wasn't working. It was working the day before at my Airbnb, but by the time I got it to the house, which is only a 20-minute drive, it wasn't working. I don't know what happened. I'm still trying to resolve that problem. So I've had to record straight through the laptop microphone like I used to do in the early days of Militantly Mixed. It's not ideal. It's not terrible. It's frustrating for me. It's more of a pet peeve, I guess, for me. So if it sounds very cavernous over the next few episodes, that's what's going on. I apologize in advance, but I'm going to get it solved so that by the time my studio space is set up, which I do have now, it should sound amazing going forward. But those are my things. Those are all the things that I had going on leading into today's episode. And so finally, the last thing that we'll get into, and then we'll get back in with Rhia, is that Auntie Teresa and I are still in the reading and review period of the Be Your Mix SF anthology. And while we are in the reading and review period of the Be Your Mix SF anthology, we are also getting set up with the print-on-demand publisher for the book, which does come with a little bit of setup production cost to get us going. So we are fundraising for that right now. We have some of it. We don't have all of it. So we're reaching out to see if we can get some support from the community to get it going. If you would like to support, donate whatever you can to help us get established publishing, you can go to militantlymix.com, click on the Be Your Mix SF Anthology tab, and there is a button right there for you to click on to donate, and it'll go directly into the publishing fund to get us set up. And that is it. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our latest cousin to the Militantly Mixed family, Rhia, the Mixed Race Mama.
And today I am joined by...
Hi, I'm Rhia Maîr Kaur.
We've been following each other on social media, but this is the first time we've actually got a chance to sit here and talk. And you recently launched your show, so I want you to introduce yourself, and I want you to talk about your show so we can get into it. But thank you so much for joining me on my new leg of life, my Mexican journey of Militantly Mixed.
Hola. Happy to be with you in Mexico. Thank you so much for having me. This is an amazing opportunity, and I love your show, so this is great. So yes, my name's Rhia, and I'm in the UK, if you can't tell from my accent, and I live in London, and I am Asian and British is one way of describing it, and then there are loads of subdivisions within that. So I was born and grew up in Wales and also in the Midlands of the UK, and my Indian family are from Punjab, which is in the north of India, and we are Punjabi Sikh, which is a religion, but Punjabi Sikh identity is almost an ethnicity as well, so there's a lot of cultural specific things within
What do they call that? Ethno-religion or something like that?
Yeah, I think I've heard it described a few different ways, and I'm not really sure what the official line is on that. So.
You're like, for me, I'm just Punjabi Sikh.
So yeah, exactly. So there's sort of lots of different things within that. And currently, for the last couple of years, I've been building a community on Instagram, trying to provide community for mixed South Asian people, because that's kind of a niche mix that isn't as prevalent perhaps, and I just saw a gap in the market. It's something that I felt I needed, and I thought if I need it, maybe someone else does too, and hopefully someone will show up, and thankfully they did. And so yeah, I've been working on that, and then I've been able to expand that recently to launching my website and my podcast, And my podcast is actually really different because there are so many brilliant OG ones like this one doing really good work. And I just wanted to provide different kind of experience. So my podcasts are actually mini chunks. They're kind of like a voice note from me to you. They deliver what I call my trademark mixed bestie energy. Which is kind of
that's a good way. That is a good way to describe it, because it's just like, hey, bestie, just checking in for 5 minutes.
That's it. Mixed bestie over here, just putting an arm around you. And so it's just either a snippet of an experience that is kind of a mixed experience that I had that day, or just, random musings or things that I've thought of. And then it's, there are expanded versions where I share some of my poetry and my writing. But broadly, I just wanted it to be a little thing that people don't have to dedicate a huge amount of time to, but they can dip in and out of, or listen to 5 in a row, or, however they want to consume it. It shouldn't be a big deal just to kind of mix in with part of your day. So.
Right. No, I think it's such a good idea too, because, attention spans also can be wild. Like I'll notice that I get like half of my show might be listened to right off the bat. And then over time, you'll see it start to go from like 45% listened to like 80 to 90, you'll see those stats when I don't look at them often, but when I do, I'm like, oh, eventually people get through it, or they might get through it throughout their whole commute for the next couple of days or something like that. Whereas the way you do it, it's like, I know that I can take this break. Like maybe that's your midday break at work or something like that. Like, and you can just have a moment. So it's really consumable and gives people a chance to just like, and it's just like a, hey,
and that's all I wanted it to be. Because part of what I do, as well as talking about the big issues, I also want to provide some levity and humor to these situations, because that's how I've always coped with things. It's kind of my defense mechanism. And so that's what I mean. That's this kind of mixed bestie thing. It's just like, look, we can have solidarity, we can be in it together, we can laugh when it gets too much, as well as cry. I'll put my arm around you, and that's what I say, I'll celebrate and commiserate with you all that it is to be mixed. And so the podcast is super new, so it's very fledgling. We're only just, I'm only just putting out the first few episodes, and so I'm really excited. Though you
do have the TikTok or Instagram reels, I guess, too. So like you've been showing short content.
Absolutely.
The kind of encapsulating a thought or an experience or something like that for a while.
Yeah, I started by kind of writing these longer form background stories just of my experience, kind of really starting at the beginning. This was me growing up. These were some of my experiences. This is what's kind of formed me to coming to this point. And then I use that as a kind of jump off, and I've done different series over the last couple of years where I sort of shine a spotlight on different aspects of being mixed, and then I've had guests on, and so I do sort of chatty and interview conversations like this, but I tend to keep that on my Instagram. And then I also do these longer form videos which include more of my kind of spoken word poetry or more of my creative endeavors, and I pop those on TikTok as well, but I'm too old for TikTok, I'm sure, so I'm not on there all the time.
Man, I want to be better at TikTok, and I was inspired to join it because of Ryan Alexander Holmes, and I was like, I love his content. I'm going to start doing, because he was encouraging me too. And then I get on there, I record like one thing, and then I don't put anything else for months. And then after that, it's like little audiograms. So hopefully my Mexican life will afford me the focus and time to like just sit down and start doing some of these videos. But I appreciate folks on Mixed Talk that are like actually sharing something tangible that people can like listen to, commiserate with. All that kind of stuff is great. So first of all, I want to say this because the same type of thing happened to me. It was the gap. I was just late nights having those mixed days, just like, I need community, because I grew up very mixed. I have 2 biracial parents. All my aunts and uncles are biracial. My cousins are all mixed. Also, I'm a U.S. military kid, which is pretty commonly pretty mixed and interracial too. So I just had mixed people all over the place. And then I became an adult and was out on my own, and I didn't have mixed community at all. And so when I decided to finally start the show, it was a direct reaction to not having an external community. And a lot of the like Facebook groups at the time were pretty toxic mixed Facebook groups. They were like light skin pride. Yeah, like mixed babies are the best babies and stuff like that. And, like it was, I couldn't find, I'm like, I know there's people like me out there. It's just regular ass mixed people who just want to talk about like, I got asked, where am I from again? Or, like that kind of stuff. Like I wanted to be able to do that with people. And so that's why I started the show. And with you seeing the gap of, in particular, South Asian mix, like I think your content is still accessible.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's important to have a kind of a slant so that people know what they're getting when they come to you, if that's specifically what they're looking for. But I do really try and keep it very open. But I suppose what I think there is a tendency online, with the online community being global, I have found there's a slight tendency, if you say mixed or biracial, people do go to one particular mix of black and white. And so I think it's really important off the bat to come out and make sure everybody knows I'm not trying to be about that. That's not me. That's not my mix. So while what I'm saying is relevant to, and I have found from, people from all different backgrounds have found it relevant. I just want to make it really clear what I'm representing, and because when I was growing up, I did not have any mixed community, like at all. I didn't meet another mixed person until I was about a teenager. And so I just hadn't met other mixed people. There wasn't any community. I'm one of 4 children in our family, and we all had completely different experiences growing up as mixed. And then we had this kind of home life, and then this outside of the home life, and then this life when we were going to relatives, to Indian relatives, for example. And so everything just felt really just put into these little boxes, and nothing ever meshed together except kind of inside me, my brain that was constantly whirring, like you say, like late at night, like, because I'm just such an overthinker. And so I think I took on all of these whirring thoughts. And I think that's what it took me a long time to realize that actually community was what I needed. And so I thought, if you can't find one, make one.
You make one, right? No, I'm so glad that there's so many of us out here that did that, because, I was telling you before we started, like before I started, there wasn't any active shows. And I was like, man, this is a perfect place for us to enter. It's mostly free. I mean, you can make it more expensive, which like for me right now, it is gotten more expensive. But at the time, it was so easy to enter and so little barriers that it was just like, man, this is the way. Like, of any way, this was a better way for me to be able to find the community that I was seeking. And what shocked me the most in the beginning was how many people in the US in particular hadn't met other mixed people. Because again, I had a very mixed childhood. So I didn't realize there were just these places that were devoid of mixed people. And then when I did go to England, the different problem was that you leave London and suddenly no one had seen brown people before. And so I'm there like, in a small town in the countryside, and my white British cousin is next to me.
By the way.
Yeah, you're like the one brown person they saw. And so I'm standing next to my cousin, and I would, like, straight up, people would ask, like, what's happening? Like, why are you together? Because we're also different in age. We have like 12 years between us. And so we'd say we're cousins, and people are like, that doesn't make sense. I don't understand. And it's like, I don't know how else to explain. You know what a cousin is, right? Like you have those, right? They make those here in England, because I'm pretty sure. And so then getting to the point of frustration, like every little, small town we stopped off in, having that kind of question and being like, okay, so now that actually made more sense going into me doing the show when I encountered people in the UK that were mixed, and literally them being the only one in the village, like in some cases, right?
So because I was born and spent my formative years in Wales, in South Wales, but in the capital of Wales, Cardiff. So that is a big city. But we lived kind of on the outskirts, but this was, my parents got married in the 70s. So this is the early 80s when we were living there, and it was not a multicultural place to be. And my mum was, white, freckles, red hair, and there was a story about her going out one day with all 4 of her kids, and we're all varying degrees of brown, but we've all got this color hair and this color eyes. So, and a woman stopped her and said, was just talking to her, and just a stranger said to her, oh, it's so nice that you could adopt 4 from the same poor village. Which is like, what?
I mean, so many assumptions.
Oh my
So many
goodness.
assumptions.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
which is just awful on so many levels. So we went from,
Wow.
you know, that was what we were dealing with. But when we moved back to England, because of my dad's work, we moved around. And then when we moved back to England, you know, in the West Midlands, that's a huge Indian community, a huge Asian community now, has grown up since kind of the early 50s. And so it's not weird to see brown people. You know, we've got whole areas that are for these communities where, you know, we can shop and buy all the food and the clothing and all everything that we need culturally. And that's where we were, you know, in the hub of this super Asian environment. And yet I still didn't fit in there, you know.
Right.
So I mean, London is amazing, and I moved to London after I finished school. I came for college and stayed, and I love it here, and I'm really happy to be here and raising a family here, because it is so much better. It's so much easier to exist in London.
Right. Yeah. I realized early in the show how kind of lucky I guess I was that I had the opportunity, especially like growing up on a military base or something like that, where a lot of the other kids were. It wasn't just that we were all mixed. It was also that we may have either a grandparent or a parent that was foreign. Which is the case in both sides of my family are both American military, and both of my grandmothers are from different countries. And so like to explain that I wasn't like the other mixed people knew, you know, I wasn't a black, white, biracial. I was a triracial. I was black, Asian, and white. And I didn't realize I wasn't seen. Like, I didn't realize that if I was in black space, that like black people treated me like black so much that when I left a black space, I didn't realize other people didn't see me as black. When I was around Asians, I was always confused why Asians didn't know I was Asian. Yeah. You know, the only confusion I didn't have was about white. I knew I had a white grandmother, and I knew that technically I had a white grandfather, even though I didn't really know him. But I was never like walking around expecting someone to see me as a white person or think of me as white or anything like that. So I'd always have to explain, I do have a white grandmother, but she's British. Like I needed people to understand she was different than what people thought of when they thought of white people here. And so to have that, like to be that lucky to grow up around other kids that also had that type of thing, a foreign grandmother or something like that at play, it made things, I didn't realize how much easier it was for me to be stronger in my identity than as I started doing the show and meeting people that like literally had no one besides their siblings. And like you said, you and your siblings have 4 different experiences. Did you talk about race as kids? Like, did you understand that kind of stuff as siblings?
Yeah, definitely. We understood it from very early on. We'd all heard the stories of what happened between my parents' families when they got together in their relationship and how that did not go down well on either side. So we always knew, and that we knew that was why there was a gap between us and either side of the family. You know, our extended family, we didn't see much of on either side for various periods. At different times we did, and then there was gaps in between that. But so we were always acutely aware that was the reason why. And we, you know, I had my first experiences of racism when I was at what we'd call junior school, primary school. So I guess I would be like 6. And so, you know, from the very beginning, that was a thing in our sphere that we were very aware of. But like I say, you know, my brother and I have had probably more negative experiences, physical assaults, racial slurs, that kind of thing growing up. And my other brother and sister would say that it really isn't, they're kind of white assumed, I suppose. Depending, we've all got different names as well that might give different hints of our background, because it's not like our parents gave us all Indian names or all kind of British names, you know, that we're a real mix in that way as well. And that definitely makes a difference, doesn't it? When you meet people, they see your name, they expect a certain face, don't they? So I think I just remember expressing things that I felt and being met by, say, my sister, because I would go to my sister because we're both girls, right? And I would be met with her just being, she didn't understand because she hadn't experienced it and it just hadn't happened to her. So I just found that, I thought, am I wrong? Am I crazy? You know, then you obviously start with self-doubt. Maybe I've misinterpreted it. But then there are some things that people say to you that you can't be misinterpreting.
You know exactly what they're talking about, right? Yeah.
Especially when it's children, because their racism extremely blatant because
Mhm.
they they don't have these levels of subterfuge to put on top of it, or disguise, or micro anything. Yeah, so I think people of that age, in primary school age, they're not very subtle about the bias that they're displaying.
Right.
And so, although I was worrying, have I misinterpreted this? Even when I would say the phrases or the words that they were using, everyone in my family would say, okay, no, there's no misinterpreting this.
Right.
It is exactly what you think it is. So we just really grew up with really differing experiences. And I think that made it hard because you sort of felt like the place that you should fit in, where everybody understands you, is in the home. And not that they weren't supportive or helpful or great about things. It's just different when someone hasn't experienced it. They just don't quite get it in the same way.
Right.
So
what about with your parents? Like, I know the biggest thing that we all figure out when we're adults, as mixed adults, is that our parents had no idea what they were doing when they already know they're breaking a barrier of some form because obviously they had problems with their families and things like that too. But they think they're creating kids that are like them, kind of.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, my parents were amazing, are amazing. And so they really did a brilliant, wonderful job in the best way they could. But in this one area, don't think they considered it, to be honest with you, because I think they were raging hard against tradition on both sides. And that meant they were in this kind of constant state just by existing in this relationship and then starting a family. So I do think there were a lot of things that weren't considered. And hey, look, they were doing the best they could. I don't feel particularly negatively about that. And it was an open forum to discuss anything at home, and we could discuss all of these things. But I did definitely find that my dad worked a lot, so we didn't always have him around to chat to about his personal experiences of growing up as a non-white person in that way. And my mum was, I think I wrote a post ages ago about how she gave me the kind of confidence of like a Karen-y white woman, because if I told her something had happened, she would march down to that school and she would slam her fist, and she wasn't having any of it, and she would put up such a fight and complain, and she was this force of nature, and she passed away a couple of years ago. So but she was this incredibly bombastic person who was like a whirling dervish, and so she wasn't going to let this happen. So what that did give me was the sense that every time this happened, it was wrong. There's no in between. There's no,
nice.
If somebody is calling you these names or physically hurting you, or, because of this reason, it is flat out. There's no discussion. It's bad. And so that was something that was really important. I think that she instilled in me this sense of injustice. And it made me really passionate about fighting injustice everywhere. It's like a huge part of my personality to kind of get on a soapbox and say, that's not fair because, fight for the lesser person and the underdog. So I do think that was an amazing thing. Yeah, definitely, that she gave me that. But in doing so, she didn't understand sort of the nuance of it. And she didn't understand when she might have been making assumptions or working on a basis, that was actually bias, or when her family were doing things. So we come to blows at times over things like that, where I would point out, actually, that's kind of what you're doing, which is hard, right? That's a really difficult one.
Especially when someone believes themselves to have like the best of intentions, or like they're as aware as they can be, and catching a moment in which their awareness is not as strong is always really tough on them. I would say I see that in family, but in friends a lot too. You really have to kind of evaluate, like, is this a deal breaker in terms of like, can I get past this conversation with you so that we can figure this out? What about like culture? How were you able to, I mean, I know it's a little bit different because you also have the religion tied to the culture and things like that. Was there ways that you got Welshness and Punjabiness?
So I think growing up, because my parents gave me 2 Welsh names, so this was a big part of my identity, and I'm the only one who was born in Wales, so I really took that on, definitely. And
were you the older sibling?
No, I'm the youngest one, so they've kind of moved around.
Okay.
But I had a full-on Welsh accent, you know, for quite a long time. And so that kind of felt quite natural for me, quite innate. I always had like a connection there. And so I didn't really struggle. And then in terms of British culture, English culture, when we lived in England, that was obviously all around. We went to schools that were broadly Christian, but not particularly religious. But that's just, you know, the upbringing that we had in terms of school and education, which was fine. Yeah. And then in terms of everything else on my dad's side, that was tricky because I know there had been conversations before we were even born about him teaching stuff to my mum and then her being able to teach us because she would be at home with us. But that never happened. And so basically it was kind of sparse, and these little pockets of culture were few and far between. And then when we were older, we were able to make conscious choices to connect with that where we could. And so, but we did spend time with my dad's mum in particular, and she was just a huge inspiration to me as this incredible matriarch who had been on this really difficult journey from India to England. And then not long after she arrived in England, her husband was already here and had got a job and things, and then sent for her, and she and my dad came over. But my grandfather passed away not very long after she got here.
Oh, wow.
So everybody back home said, you've got to come home and marry someone else. And she kind of went, I don't think so. I'm staying here. I'm free. So
yeah, for real.
She had like broken free of this husband who she didn't particularly like, having had an arranged marriage to him. And she wanted to raise her children and give them the education and things. That's why she'd come here. So she said, no, I'm staying and I'm quite happy. Thank you. And so again, she was this other kind of really fierce matriarch. So I had these two women, you know, my mum and my Indian grandmother, who just were similar in loads of ways that they would never admit to, I'm sure.
Sure.
But they really were. And I took on like loads of elements of that. And I always felt way more connected to that side of my family and that side of my culture. And so I went hard in on the Asianness compared to my siblings, you know, in terms of getting to grips with the culture and trying to get to grips with the language, which wasn't easy and I'm not very good at, but I try my best. And, you know, food and culture and festivals and things, I was all in for that, you know, and I wanted to do as much as I could, which wasn't always easy because divides happen in families and there's always family politics. But I definitely tried my best and feel really happy that I got to know my grandmother in a sort of independent adult way before she passed away. So as we got a bit older, I was able to develop that a bit with her, which I'm really happy about. Yeah.
Yeah, I always wonder in the cases in which the father, especially in particular if it's let's just say Western, because that can mean you know, any race necessarily, but where one parent is Western and the other parent is Eastern or non-Western, I guess, where it's the father, how much culture actually filters through.
So yes, I have a whole thing about this.
Like trying to find like the best way to say it. It's like no shade to the fathers because different circumstances or why they're not always the imparters of culture.
Culture passes through women, you know, because most societies are patriarchal, right? So it's women who do the child rearing and the child bearing and the child rearing, and they do the cooking, and they do things, you know, with songs and lullabies and rhymes to teach us language and to teach us how to tie our shoes and all those sorts of things. In every culture, there are these nursery rhymes, children's stories, fables that get repeated. Yeah. And generally speaking, that is a big generalization, but for the most part, that comes from women. And so I've always said that the fact that it was my dad who is Asian has meant that there is a detachment that wouldn't have been there had it been the other way around, because I know all of those things from my mum's culture, you know, and she definitely imparted all of those things and her kind of wisdom and her things from her cultural heritage and history. You know, I know all of those things because she told me them, you know, taught me them. So yeah, I definitely agree that there is a disconnect when it is from your father's side, which I did spend some time being angry about that as a teenager, being angry with my dad, and which is awful and kind of typical. And I hate being typical.
But you were a kid, like how could you have known? Like you don't have enough of the historical context as to why, you know. So like it. But you acted out the way you were feeling.
but my amazing grandmother, she said, for example, she taught my dad how to cook because she said, I'm done with this, women being the only ones who cook. So I'm teaching him how to do it.
Good.
So things like that. She was already breaking these stereotypes, way back when. And
that's
so
awesome.
That was really good because I could learn, bits and pieces from him that he had, and then get the rest from her. But religiously, we weren't brought up in Sikhi particularly. We went, to weddings and festivals and cultural events, and we went to the Gurdwara, and so I knew what all that was about, and I learned for myself about the teachings. And but it's not something my parents didn't like. We weren't baptized as Christians. My mum's family are Christian, so we weren't put into any religion. And my parents really wanted to leave that open. They're not particularly religious people, so for them, they were quite happy for us to grow up and choose whatever path we wanted, which I am really thankful for, because I think I'm glad to have been educated in both and just muddle my way through.
No, I think especially when religion is such a huge part of the embedded culture too, I think like some of it's so hard to divorce, so you have to you have to get part of it in there. But if you're also mixed with sort of like, I always view a lot of British religion is kind of hobbyist. It seems like it's not as intense as it can be here in the States.
We call it high days and holidays. We call that. In
It's just
you only go to church for high days and holidays.
Right. And we're here in the States, and can be like, Christianity can be really intense and a different way that it embeds in their daily lives and their culture and stuff like that, where you don't have room for experiencing other things. So that would immediately eliminate. I understand that this ceremony is part of your culture, but it's also part of your religion. So, that would probably be a thing here. Yeah. So I guess that's sort of the benefit of the
absolutely
relaxedness, I guess. About
definitely. And I'm really happy to have grown up in that way, because like you say, there's so much of my Punjabi culture, which is tied in the religion, and to be able to experience that and learn that and appreciate that is a great thing, and I'm really, really lucky to have had that. And even now, in our family life, we celebrate so many different festivals across the year, because that's one of the ways I like to be able to carry my culture through and give it to my child, is by just celebrating as many things. And my husband's different culture again, so we do a bit of everything, and that feels right for us because it's valid, and it's all of our cultural experience combined and put into the future.
I was lucky in that I had an aunt that was curious about everybody, and so we did all the things, even things that didn't necessarily apply to us. And so I think that, in combination with just being a mixed person, and generally I'll say that it's a bias and I'll stand by it, is that I think we tend to be a little bit more empathetic generally, because we already know what it's like to view things from multiple cultures. But that being mixed, plus having an aunt that would take me to the Irish festival, that would take me to the Indian festival, the Greek food festival, stuff like that, gave me first a curiosity about other people, and then next just an understanding that like this food item that I get from Japan, there is a version of it that the Greeks do that is different. Like the seasonings are different, but like we're the same kind of people. Like we do very similar things. And I think that is really helpful. Like on a broad spectrum, if we could just do this with our families, it would be pretty great. But in the ways in which we can maintain aspects of the cultures that we have. And, it's tougher, especially when we have a parent that comes from not the country we were raised in, that you have, or in my case, since my grandparents were the people who had the bigger influence in the early part of my life, my parents were teenagers. So, but with like the adults, the grandmothers were the ones who imparted, knowledge and stuff like that. And I do think, I heard someone recently say that a lot of your culture actually comes from grandmother. Like it is a skip like that. You're more like your grandmother. If you're raised a female, you're more like your grandmother than you are your mother. And things like that, and it is true. I'm very much a product of my Japanese grandma. I think in particular, she was resistant to her own culture. Like she wanted to be an American. She married an American. She made the efforts to like become American. The things that she gave me that were Japanese, I see evidence of it in so many other cultures that I engage with, and I'm glad that I had that opportunity. So I like seeing that whatever it is, it's hard. It's so hard to be mixed and not a member, a main member, like, you know, language, food, not knowing how to cook quite right, like all that kind of stuff starts to wear you down. So in the ways in which you get access to it, I love that your grandmother did teach your father to cook, because
she was the best in that way, you know.
Like if you had no food growing up, that would be, to me, like not having the food of our culture seems worse than not having the language. Like
food is, I think when people ask me what is the biggest way to connect to your culture, it's food. I mean, I'm never sure whether that's because, you know, Punjabi food is you know, really famous in the UK. You know, a lot of our original Indian restaurants were, you know, that's what the food was. So I always kind of think, is it because it's Punjabi food, or is it because it's food and everybody has that with their own cultural food? You know? And I love discovering that it's food. It's, you know, it brings people together. It, you know, it's, you literally feel the thread of all your ancestors is through you when you're making it. You feel so connected to those aspects of your family and people you know you didn't even know, and I love that. I think it's a brilliant accessible thing as well, right? Even if you can't make it, if you can find a restaurant and if you can go and have it, that's valid. That's, you know, that's a really great way to connect. And in fact, I love what you said about how, you know, the similarities that you found between different, when you discover new things in different cultures, because I did a whole series way back, like beginning of last year, I think, where I invited people to talk about the similarities between the cultures that they have in their mix, because we spend a lot of time saying, oh, I'm different because I'm this and I'm this, and there's this side and there's that side. And actually, if you look, there are similarities. And for me, I found particularly there were so many things that I was learning about Welsh culture and Punjabi culture that I suddenly went, oh my gosh, that's the same, or that's similar. And nobody would think that. You know, they're on different sides of the world, different climates, completely crazy to think that there would be factors in common.
But like people are people, right? Like
exactly.
There's
and
things that we crave.
Is humanity. Yeah.
So I sometimes I like to ask questions of people, like on the show. I'll be like, do you have a favorite hybrid food? You know, a food that connects things or whatever. So since we're on the subject, I think this is perfect. Do you have a favorite hybrid food?
Like a fusion food?
A fusion food. Like it's weird too, because Punjabi food is so present throughout the UK. But
absolutely.
With that in mind.
I don't think I've had the need. I mean, okay, so for example, even when we were growing up, we would have, if we were having samosa or pakora, we would have it with ketchup. So, especially, you know, even not just because we were kids and it was a bit spicy and the ketchup would help make it a bit less spicy, but even the grown-ups, that's what we would have as a snack. And so that feels like a kind of a fusion-y thing.
It does. It's accessible.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think the big three I think of, if I'd stayed over at my grandmother's house in the morning, she would make me rotis, so, you know, bread, unleavened bread, and she would roll them up in a tube, but she would put marmalade in it because it was breakfast time.
Yes.
And marmalade was very English.
It's very English.
So instead of having like toast and marmalade, I would have marmalade on rotis. And that just felt, you know, that was a very fusion-y thing. I don't even know why she did that. It must have been something she picked up, because when you couldn't buy everything in the shop, she must have just at some point found out about marmalade.
No, I think that works.
She would give us as kids, because it's sweet and it's wholesome, you know, it's hearty breakfast. It's a good breakfast. And then the last thing is, I think it's quite common for a lot of British Asians, especially families that came over when I did. We have this thing, we have Heinz baked beans are really common in English, right? So you get beans on toast and all of that kind of thing.
I'm a beans on toast advocate, and I get a lot of heat for it here in the States, but you will not mess with me and beans on toast.
I'm so glad. Right, so beans on toast is you know, top tier snack food.
It is, right?
Any time of day, you can have it for breakfast, lunch, dinner, midnight snack. I mean, it's so versatile. It's amazing.
It's perfect.
So we have this thing where everybody, it's such a store cupboard staple to have a tin of baked beans.
Right.
And it was really common for housewives, you know, Indian women, to just get a tin of beans and spice that up and put in all their spices and chilies and ginger and onions and make a curry, as it were, out of these beans. And I think every British Asian kid has grown up with that somehow. So I want to try that. Nothing in the cupboards, that's what you've got, you know. And it's cheap as well. It would have been cheap when people didn't have, you know, a lot of things. So that's like real comfort food, you know, that that makes. So I guess, yeah, those are my fusion-y foods.
I absolutely need to try that because, that blue tin was very much a staple even in my life here, right?
Yeah.
And when I'm here in Mexico now, so I have yet to find both my British comfort foods and my Japanese comfort food. So what I'm going to have to do is just find whatever the Mexican version of is and try to make it work, which occasionally
and that's
I've
how
had
these dishes get created, right?
That's how it happens. But I love the idea of that, like just taking the tin of beans and being like, these are our spices. Let's see what happens.
Masala
so
beans.
I do. I love it. I want to try it so bad. I need to try that. When I was back in the States, I started getting these they were prepackaged, but still it was an access thing of samosas that I would use my Japanese sauces to dip it in. So like your ketchup, right? There's a tonkatsu sauce, which is kind of a thick brown sauce. It's a hearty sauce.
Yeah.
And I had it in the fridge one day and I ran out of the sauce that came with the things. And so I was like, let me see if it just works. Now it's the only way when I'm at home, like it's the only way that I do it because those sauces worked. Like the flavors worked.
Yeah.
And I love stuff like that. And there is somewhat like, I think especially like across all of Asia, East, Southeast, and South Asia, we all have some kind of a fried potato thing.
Yeah.
We all have a version of it. I mean, even Japanese, it's different than like even Southeast Asian, which is different than even South Asian. But we all have something that is a fried potato thing. Mm-hmm. So if I get a chance to eat whatever your fried potato thing, like I want to know what your fried potato thing is because that's something I really enjoy.
I've got a whole rant about how potatoes are the most versatile vegetable, and I won't have anybody tell me differently because they're the best thing in the whole world because you can do anything with
them, right? Like I didn't even know how invested in a potato I was until TikTok started showing me potato recipes, and I was like, I have a whole folder now of just saved TikTok potato recipes.
TikTok is good for recipes.
It is, right? And I don't cook. I just have them saved. I just like have a fantasy world in which one day I'm gonna learn how to cook. But then I started looking at the amount that I have saved. I was like, I think it's a kink now. I don't know why, but like it's so like I said,
safe space. You're amongst friends. I feel it too.
I was like, is this a thing for me? Am I just like really into potato? But I feel like that about rice dishes too. Like,
rice, yeah, of course. What can't you do with rice?
But yeah, I agree with you. I think food more than anything, I think food helps connect you because like, spices don't change. Mm-hmm. The spices that you're eating, your ancestors ate and things like that. Exactly. What they've managed to keep growing and stuff until we've come around. So the food that we're tasting, we can make an argument for this is what my great grandmother must have had a chance to. So I agree with you. And
it feels very, like I say, it feels validating to know that, and to say this is acceptance. I'm eating the acceptance. And like I think in Punjabi culture, I always say like we are big feeders, like everything, all hospitality, and it's the same in so many Asian cultures, right? All hospitality is based around food as well. So many elements of culture and how to be Punjabi or whatever are tied up in, when you have guests come over, this is what you do and this is what you provide them, and so I say I'm a feeder and I'm a big cook, and it's how I show people I love them. I cook for them, and I give, and that's like me giving them take my love and nourish yourself with it.
Yeah, because like for me, having two grandmothers that were both British and Japanese, both of these cultures aren't known for their physical affection, and not even like very much vocally affectionate either. So the way that you could tell that your grandmothers loved you was how often that they fed you and stuff. And
I'm gonna do both though. I'm gonna feed you with this hand and cuddle you with
tell you with the other. Yeah. So like that's the thing we're trying to undo from our childhood, because I still struggle with touch. Like I can once I'm touchy with a person, once I achieve that level of closeness, I get overly affectionate, I guess, because I'm probably starved for what I was missing in the time period that I wasn't comfortable touching. But a lot of that has to do with, grandmothers who literally cringed whenever you would try to hug or kiss them, because that wasn't their cultures. That's not how they did it. But, at least with food, with British food, it was a little tough. Like I'm a big fan of a British breakfast. And of course, like I said, huge advocate for beans on toast. I've had like literal internet fights with friends because of beans on toast.
They're wrong.
Like, in the same way that if you come to my house and my cats are afraid of you, you probably will not be my friend for very long. I think I also use beans on toast as a litmus test too. Because if you're like, then we probably
tells you a lot about a person.
Like I don't know. I think we're not gonna work out if it doesn't work.
Yeah. Totally get that.
I love that. When you started to think about actually creating content, like what was the thing that got you away from just like you're a regular ass mixed person wanting community to I'm gonna do this thing, I'm gonna make this effort?
My mum passed away, and I think there are so many. Obviously, grief is this incredibly heavy process and this incredibly heavy thing, and she was quite young and she had a short illness, so it wasn't like we knew it was coming, but we weren't prepared, as it were, as you could ever be prepared. But I think really that just was such a seismic shift in my worldview, and I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me, the anchor had been pulled up, I felt really adrift, and it started my mind whirring again, and I had all these questions, and it just felt like there was so much kind of blank space now, and I wanted to fill that with something positive, and I wanted to try and direct my thoughts and my actions to in a positive way, and I just sort of saw this gap. That I'm not saying that I couldn't have done all of this or talked about this if she were here, but it's just that it I don't know, it felt like the space,
that's when it triggered,
and this is how I was going to channel what I was feeling, and so that was really the catalyst for all of this happening. And I think I had lots of ideas about what I wanted to do and what I wanted to create, and originally I sort of went into the Instagram space as this I was sort of just like a digital scrapbook of just thoughts here, there, and pictures and bits and pieces, and it sort of started to come together for me. Just once I started putting things out there, I had clarity for myself, and intentions that I wanted to move forward with became a bit clearer as I was doing it, which felt really good, and then the more people that I found and connected with, and that was just an amazing feeling to build this community and start.
Isn't that a weird part of this? Like, I didn't expect, like, I tend to be like somewhat antisocial in general, but like in person, I guess.
Yeah.
But still craving community. And then the first time you get that email from someone that's just like, I also feel this thing that you feel, or whatever it is, a comment under your picture or whatever, that you start to like the effect it has like on you, on your body and everything like that. It's so unexpected. It's different than just general commiseration or something like that.
Absolutely.
It's just like, it's strange. I don't know what.
It's a really powerful connection to have, and especially if for whatever reason you have felt devoid of that type of connection. And I just think I was so passionate about all the questions and the theories and the thoughts that have plagued me, and finding an opportunity to share that with people, but also because I'm pretty old for the internet world, so I was coming to this quite late, and so I sort of felt like maybe I'd gained some wisdom throughout the years that hopefully I could start sharing, just purely by the fact of having existed for an amount of time, and all these things have happened to me. Not that it's wisdom that means that I know
life experience is a
else.
Wisdom.
So that's really all it was. I just thought, well, look, all of these things have happened to me, and I've had all these quite varied versions, or I've lived as a mixed person in these different spaces, as we all have, and then maybe I can just provide that for people. Like originally I was an actress, so I went through the entertainment industry as a mixed person with everything that entailed. I went to drama school, and had a lot of experiences from being really young in the business, or because I started working when I was quite young, and all the way through my life. That definitely put a different slant on things, and so I thought maybe that was of interest to people to share those kind of stories too, because it's quite reflective of society. And I'm amazed at how much society has changed from when I, was a teenager to now. And I'm impressed. There have been there has been some forward movement, not enough, not quickly enough. But
I mean, I think very much the 2 steps forward, 1 step back thing is kind of a real a real thing, because
Yeah.
like when I was a kid, I was Black in Black spaces and I didn't have to question that. And they knew I had a Japanese mom. They knew I had a white grandmother, but I was still Black and I was a part of the community. Whereas what I'm noticing is the current younger generation is not experiencing that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and the flip of that for me was that I'm actually more accepted in Asianness now than I was when I was younger. And so like whatever's happening, progress is being made, but something is derailing an aspect of it. And then we got to keep going. So I agree, like a lot of changes have happened, and there is some ways in which we can maneuver spaces a little bit easier than we probably couldn't sometimes. For me, if I had remained in the closed community of Blackness that I was in as a child, as an adult, I probably wouldn't really have a mixed identity. I would probably just have a Black identity. But when I left that neighborhood, I became mixed because people started asking me questions that they didn't ask me when I was a kid. So I'm grateful that I had community acceptance and stuff like that. And then I'm shocked now when I don't. But I have to understand like what's happening in those spaces, and I'm doing my best to like educate myself before I get crazy upset about it. But that's why having mixed community is so important, because you and I share something in our mix. We don't have the same experience, but we have similar things that have happened that it doesn't matter what our mix is. So generally you and I may have a little bit more in common than I might have with another Japanese person.
Sure.
Like a monoracial Japanese person or something like that, right? And even though the Japanese person and I come from the same culture, their experience, my experience is not the same. Yours and mine might be closer. Just on the very, you know.
Yeah, I think one of the things I always say that about being mixed, a huge part of our existence and our identity and the way we think about ourselves actually comes from the way other people view us. So like you're saying, when you were in one space, you were viewed this way. That's so you that becomes how you are, how you're living, what you are. And then you move into other spaces and you're seen from different angles. And but all the time, the thing about being mixed, because you are both, right? You're not half, you're not a quarter, you're not 25%, whatever. You exist as both of those things, all of those things at the same time.
At the same time.
But you're constantly viewed through different lenses that look at you differently. And like I always say, white passing is in the eye of the beholder. Because to somebody, they'll look at a person and say, oh my God, I just thought you were white. Well, I didn't know, whatever. And somebody else will be like, oh, you look so foreign to me, or some insert horrible phrase here. You know, because it's just about their lens and their experience and where they're coming from. And that's, I think, what's quite troubling sometimes about being mixed is we feel we don't have autonomy over our identity because it's constantly questioned and it's constantly flipped back at us from someone else's point of view, which can be really invalidating. So there has to be this amount of process of experiencing that, understanding that, accepting that, but also then just defining it for yourself and, you know, you're taking that on and just saying, actually, well, irrespective of what you think or how you view me, this is where I am and this is what I am, and that's how I'm just going to move through the world as me.
No, I 100% agree, because the amount of time, like how long it took me to realize that my identity was impacted, and even the way I have to in quotation, like even the way I have to move today sometimes is affected by the way people on the outside view me, because a big part of my life I was just a Black girl. But I leave my neighborhood and I'm no longer a Black girl. I have to incorporate. In that case, I felt like I had to incorporate what other people believed in me. Otherwise, I was going to be accused of other things I wasn't doing, performative Blackness and all that other kind of stuff, right? And so now as an adult, okay, I'm a mixed person. I have a mixed podcast. I engage in mixed community. And now the accusing thing that comes is that it's my whole personality. Well,
I've had that one.
Is it a personality to move forward in the thing that comes up so often about yourself? Okay, fine. Then it's my personality. But what's happening is that I'm not going to talk about it nearly as much as you're going to talk about it. And then and because you're talking about it, now I'm going to talk about it. And what made me want to press record on this show was the fact that the people I talked to about being mixed the most weren't mixed people.
Yes, I've got a video coming very soon. Shameless plug for my Instagram.
Shameless plug. Put the link in, we'll reshare.
I'm doing a series at the moment of how to respond to the frequently asked questions we get as mixed race people, right? Including online commentary. And that's exactly, I've been talking about exactly this, because it's like, you can level that at me, that you've made this your whole personality. Oh, it's in your Instagram bio, it's even in your handle. Like, what, get up, you're not special, get a life, kind of thing. And I say, yeah, but literally the only time I ever used to talk about this is when you lot would ask me. It's literally when somebody would come up to me and ask me, and that's why I have a conversation about this. So then, if that's going to keep happening, and you're going to keep getting it wrong, I'm going to take control of that conversation and present it and just take the reins a little bit and say, actually, well, if we're having the conversation anyway, please allow me to explain to you and direct it a little bit so that we don't make mistakes and we don't offend people, and we can try and find ways to communicate that aren't just this, because I would love to talk about all the other things I have.
I would love to focus most of my energy on other things. The thing is that to have agency in this conversation about the way somebody else perceives me, I have to prevent them from having the conversation at me.
Yeah, exactly. I'd like to be an active participant, please.
Yeah, don't just tell me, oh, you look like such and such or whatever, Okay, I don't know why you needed to tell me that. Here's what I actually identify as, if I'm granting you permission to hear.
You say it, and they go, no, I don't see it. It's like, what? Like, oh, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. I forgot. Yeah.
So is it my personality, or do you just need to feed me what your deal is? And so I'm taking that conversation about mixedness to mixed community versus continuing to have it in monoracial spaces felt empowering to me, but it also what it gave me is a community. It gave me a different way to view mixedness. It gave me a way to which, like, I was always excited when I saw other mixed people, and I didn't know that what I was excited about was the idea that, oh, this person might know what it feels like when someone says, you're Chinese, right? I don't want to be deflated because they got it wrong. I want to be able to just be like, one day, could you just look at me and be like, you must be a Black, Japanese, Welsh, English. I know that's never going to happen. It's fine. But
when we're wearing the t-shirts, right?
Yeah, when we're wearing the t-shirt that says, in case you want to know, here's everything that I am. But what I have now, because of doing this show, is getting a chance to speak to regular ass mixed people that's why I don't too often go up for celebrities or create. I do try to find them on occasion. I do talk to them and stuff like that. But a lot of times I just want to speak to regular ass mixed people, because on the day to day we have such a similar experience that just knowing that you're not alone goes so far in helping with anxiety and depression and teaching ourselves to validate ourselves. And I think that
imposter syndrome and all of that.
Imposter syndrome, and I get it. Like even today, I experience imposter syndrome. And I've been doing this for the 5 years. I have awards that tell me I did it okay. It's like, but still there's be a day where I'm like, am I even the right person to have this? Or am I still a right person to have this conversation? Like those kind of questions.
Before I started all of this, I made a mood board. I've never made a mood board in my entire life, right? So something possessed me to make this mood board. And I just needed to try and collect my thoughts and have some sort of direction for them. And right in the center, I wrote a thing in big marker pen that said, your lived experience is what qualifies you. Because before I even started, I had these questions of like, do I have the right to go and shout about this, to the public?
Okay.
Does anybody need to listen to me say that? And of course, everybody has thoughts like that, but I was quite happy with myself that I wrote that, and that was my statement that I was sticking to, because that's right. I'm not an expert or an authority in anything. This is only my experience, and that's all I'm ever going to speak to. And that can't be wrong because I was there. So, I'm just telling things from my perspective. And I think that kind of gave me a bit more freedom to relax and just, do what I was going to do my way, which, as we've already said, is, so different from everybody else. And that's what makes this all interesting.
Yeah, there's so much room for all of us. And that's the other thing is like, there's been times when I've talked to people that like, I thought about doing something like this, but I'm so glad that you're here. And I'm like, listen, at the end of the day, I still did this for myself.
Yeah.
I had the gap. I found I had something missing. I created the thing I was missing because I couldn't wait and hope somebody else was going to make the thing that I was missing. So while I hope other people want to listen and I hope people want to participate, I'm still doing this because every day I want to. And every day I'm missing the conversation with the person who is Punjabi Welsh, who also started a, like, that's the thing. That's what I'm missing. I'm missing that. So I'm going to keep looking for that. And until I no longer want to look for it, until I'm no longer curious, I don't know how I stop doing this. It may change. It may be a different thing. I might find a different path or something like that. But for now, this is the way I'm feeling a gap that I'm missing. And so, like, if you like the thing I'm missing, that I'm also missing, and you also want to hear it, great, perfect. Help keep me doing this. But what you're missing might not be fulfilled 100% by what I'm doing. So you have to do the thing, right? And as long as we both exist and other creators are out here existing and doing things from different perspectives, I had a very clear idea of what I thought success was when I got started. That has been obliterated. And and it changes all the time. Every time I meet a new person, something adjusts and something adapts and changes. And I think that if not for people like you and me and some of the other creators out there, we wouldn't have the language that is developing about talking about mixedness that we now have. All of us are essential to making that possible. We need all of this because we are finally creating a definable language around speaking about our identities. I think it's going to make better parents. If monoracial parents are paying attention, I hope it's going to make better parents for mixed people, mixed people who are having mixed kids that are a different mix than their mix. Hopefully,
one of the things I did when I first started was I created a glossary, because there are a lot of terms that people use, and there are some terms that people use interchangeably which actually aren't. Some of them have got like a formal definition, but actually colloquially we all accept a different meaning of them.
Right.
So it was kind of important for me also to lay this layer of groundwork to say, when I say this word, this is what I mean. You might have a different definition of it, but culturally or whatever, for whatever reason, this is where I'm coming from with that word, which may be slightly different. And that felt important to me to establish a language sort of barrier, a boundary. And I definitely think that as a parent, it's been one of my biggest intentions is to examine the areas that I felt perhaps were missed out of my experience of being parented and what I wanted to provide. But I've also been very keen to be really finely attuned to the fact that my son is a different mix, is growing up in a different world, in a different city, and will have an entirely different experience from me. And it's my job to learn from him, from what he needs, and just create an open discourse. So it's two layered, I suppose, that it's kind of trying to fill in some gaps that I felt I had, but also leave gaps for what he needs, because I have to recognize that part of the thing of being a mixed parent or parenting a mixed child, isn't it? Is you have to lay over that part of you that says, I won't ever fully understand your unique experience.
Yes.
And I wish more parents could know that in this modern world. I really do.
Not only know it, but like not take it as enact it, but not take it as a dig against them. We're not expecting you to know everything. Absolutely. How could we? But like you said, I love the way you said that. Actually, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say it like that. Leaving space for them to inform you, for your child to inform you. Yeah. Because the thing is, kids can talk about this. They can talk about it.
Yes. Yeah.
If you shut them down, they lose the ability over time, I think, to openly talk about it. But after seeing some of the growing up mix recently, and seeing some people who I know who have mixed kids, the way they talk about who they are now, those kids fucking know who they are. I knew who I was when I was a kid too.
Exactly. That's the thing. Yeah.
But you kind of forget that when you get older, and you just kind of, like, oh, all this stuff I put together as an adult. No, I knew what was happening. Yeah. I may not have had good ways of talking about it the way the kids can articulate it now. Yeah. I mean, I think I have a memory of thinking that my parents weren't different than like a tiger is orange and a lion is like tan. But they're both cats. Like, I understood that my parents were both people. And I'm thinking about like kindergarten Charmaine. What did kindergarten Charmaine think? that, you know, my dad was a lion and my mom was a tiger. Like they're both cats. They're just different color cats.
Yeah.
And I didn't need anything more complicated than that at that age.
Yeah.
As you go older, you need a little bit more language. And I think we finally are starting to develop that. And if we do what you just said, leave room for your kids to also inform you, you know, you got to give kids credit for things that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we have to validate their experience, even if it's different from our own. And I think in terms of parenting, it's okay not to know all the answers, but you have to know that there are questions.
Yes.
I really feel that's important, because I think if, you know, based on my experience with my parents and some other people who I've met over the years, I think you don't have to know everything. Nobody said you did. Even, you know, whatever kind of parenting you're doing, you're always going to feel like you don't know all the answers, right? It's part of the gig. But I think it's just really important to know that there are some specific questions that go in this type of, you know, when you're parenting a mixed kid, and find out the answers together and learn them together. And just having the awareness that the question exists is a big deal, I think.
I agree. I think the best thing an adult can do to a child is say, I don't know, but we're going to try to find out.
Let's find out together.
Yeah. I heard that on something, and the first time I ever heard it, I teared up and I was like, oh shit, is that all I needed? Like, is all this time is a parent just saying like, I don't know, but let's find out. Like, goodness gracious. I remember getting really emotional.
Thing that I used to feel so. One of the ways I felt like I was othered from my Punjabi community is when there were festivals and things, or we had traditions or things that we did. I would always be like, oh, I don't know why we do that. I don't know the origin. Why do we do that? And I would always feel like that's because I'm mixed, and that must be why I don't know. And then the first time I asked a fully Asian person my age, why do we do that? And they said they didn't know either. Oh my goodness, that was such a pivotal moment.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Hang on, wait, nobody knows. Nobody
knows. We just do it.
Yeah. And that was really powerful, because that was one of those things I had just assumed it was because you were mixed, and no one's ever given you the full explanation. But turns out,
like you're barred from, like, they're not allowed to tell you or something like that.
Yeah.
I saw a TikTok recently that said that traditions are just peer pressure from your ancestors.
That's amazing.
Because we don't know why we do a whole lot of these things. We just do.
You're just supposed to.
You're just supposed to, right? But thank you so much for
coming. Rubbing
on.
their hands with glee and just saying,
I know, they're just like,
still doing
look at these fools doing this thing. We just made it up. It didn't even mean anything. Like, why did we clap 3 times? I don't know. Let's do it. That's so funny. Thank you so much for joining me, and also being patient for people who don't know, because I'm going to edit this out a lot. Is I am in my new house and I had service people show up, so I had to keep disappearing. So I'm so sorry, but I appreciate so much that you were patient and kind through that, because it happened out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting it, but you still like delivered so hardcore on this episode. I'm like, I have some notes that I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna steal that. So I appreciate
trademark. Free, steal everything. I give it to you.
I appreciate like just being able to have these kind of conversations with people, and like hearing the way that they put an idea versus the way I put an idea, and being like, I like the way they say it better. So
thank you for giving the space, and thank you for having me. Like, honestly, it's been amazing for me, and it's really great to be talking with you and being on, you know, this side of your show, and chatting to you directly rather than listening to you talk. It's been brilliant. And I think just affording the space for all of us is just, you know, very appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Isn't it funny though? Like, cause you kind of think you know someone, cause like I've watched you and I've heard your voice, and we didn't even say hi. We just started talking. You're just like, what's up? So I love that part too. That's the fun of like connecting with someone that you see, like you think you already sort of know them. Why don't you tell everybody how to find your social media channels, your website, the whole thing?
So I'm on Instagram, which is where I am all the time, basically. So that's at Mixed Race Mama. And that's the same for TikTok, which I'm sometimes on TikTok, but there's stuff there that you can look at. My website is www.mixedracemama.com. And there's links there to everything. So you can get links through my Instagram, or you can get links on my website. And there's going to be some new things coming soon. I'm hoping to open a virtual community center, which is going to be exciting. And so there'll be more kind of community interaction coming soon.
Excellent. Well, thank you again so much. And for everybody out there, don't forget to be your mixed ass selves.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Militantly Mixed is a ManeHustle Media Podcast, produced and hosted by me, Charmaine Fury. Music is by David Bogan the One. You can follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Militantly Mixed. If you'd like to become a sponsor of Militantly Mixed, please go to patreon.com/militantlymixed for monthly sponsorship or paypal.me/militantlymixed for a one-time only donation. And if you like what you hear on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to be your mixed ass self. ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.